Hello, this is Andy, and this video has taken a long time in coming. It was a year and a half ago, July of 2022, when my parents and I and my brother Mark took a tour with the Creation Center and Bill Hosch, I think that's how you say his name, to see the Mount Saint Helens area and to understand it a little bit better. Well, I had heard of it for, over 30 years and knew the story more or less, but I was blown away. Yeah, blown away by the actual facts. And so from the very start of the day, I took these little video clips explaining more or less what Bill had told us a few minutes before. So I didn't have to do too much editing now and just threw them together and added a few things now and then. So hope you enjoy it. Just a fascinating event, and I highly recommend that tour. And what a demonstration of power. Just a tiny little thing for God to do, but my goodness. I hope you enjoy it. This is the Tuttle River coming, the two branches of it. This is the southern branch. When the mountain exploded, a wall of 3 or 4 feet high of rubble, mud, trees, rocks came down from this southern branch. And hours later, because of the distance and just the way it happened, a different kind of mudslide came down here, which is the northern branch. And it was way over our feet high. So all of this was covered in mud, or went through, a mudslide went through, joined, and went on down dozens of miles down toward ultimately Portland, the sediment and all that. So it took out bridges, everything along the way. And you can see the young tree line. Those are all trees that are less than 40 years old, the lower level, because that's what was taken out by the mud. And all of this and all of this is young tree. Okay, all of this is volcanic sediment left over from the mudslide. This is like a welcome center thing. And we are in the blast zone. Mount Saint Helens is there, 13 miles away. All of these trees were completely roasted and the whole landscape turned white. You can see some old trees, some original trees right there, protected by that knoll. And the old road up to Mount Saint Helens is 100 to 200 feet below that whole fill in right there. And you see some little mountains jutting out, and they are actually just pieces of huge chunks of the mountain that came down with the mud flow. So the mountain blew north and then took a 90-degree turn and came down this valley, the Tuttle River. We're at a place called Castle Rock, and we're overlooking the valley again. This is where all the mud went. You can see the volcano. It's missing 1,300 feet of mountain, and then off to the side it blew that way north and then came down this valley. Okay, so you see a lake there. That is, I think it's Castle Rock Lake. It used to be Castle Rock Creek. There's another larger lake in that valley called Cold Water, I think. It's even larger. It was a creek before. So when all of that material came down in a massive mudslide, it actually was so high that it dammed up those creeks and created 2 lakes and a bunch of littler things. So there's 100, 200 feet deep right there, and they had to do work on the the dam just because they were scared that that might at some point cave, give in and create another mudslide. But you can see that is 5 miles across from lake to lake, which means the natural damming by the mudslide was 5 miles wide to create those two. Okay, we're getting another fascinating chat by Bill here. Okay, so this is called Coldwater Lake. It's enormous. This was a creek before, way down there, and this was all forest. And the day that blew first, the cloud of whatever, dust, smoke, ice, everything that flew by at the speed of an airplane, 650 miles an hour. And the avalanche came later, slower, at only 150 to 200 miles an hour, came out of the wall there, and then went down that, is it Tuttle River? And so this section here is the dam, the natural dam created by all of the mud and sludge. And so the creek was dammed up. And then this is what you have as a result. It's a massive lake. and what I understand is it's way smaller than Spirit Lake, which is the main one. And so first the wave of 650 mile an hour plume comes across from the explosion, and then afterward the humongous mudslide up to 5 miles wide going at 150 to 200 miles an hour, taking everything out in front of it. Okay, so we've stopped here by this pond, swamp kind of thing, and Bill has been explaining how that before all this high grass grew, you could see it more easily. You can see evidence here of a dam, and you can see some logs that have been chewed up, and you can see a hump of what can more easily be seen as a beaver, what do you call those? Beaver den, Beaver Hill, Beaver Mount. And so he made the illustration or explained the illustration of how nobody ever sees a beaver. He's never seen a beaver here, and you probably will not see a beaver here, but there is all kinds of evidence that there are beavers here, and nobody doubts that there are. And so you carry that over on into nature and science and the overwhelming evidence that God exists. And so he does a good job at explaining and illustrating. Okay, so that's where we just came from. I forgot to mention that this entire area that we're walking on, what's your name, by the way? Willie. Willie lives in Israel, and he's on this tour. Anyway, this entire area is part of the mudslide, or what's left over. This was originally 200 feet lower, was a valley, and now it's built up. And he explained as well the sequence and process of plants that came back to life, and that's still happening as plants die, and in the process other ones come up higher, and they eventually get knocked out as well. And there's a whole sequence of vegetation that's happening right here before our eyes, so to speak, and nobody had ever seen that exactly like that before. Okay, and Bill is explaining we are in the mud flow right now, and there are different ridges from previous mud flows on both sides of this valley. But he said, have you ever wanted to climb to the top of Mount Saint Helens? And he said, well, you're on the top of Mount Saint Helens, because the top of Mount Saint Helens is all of this flow. And so the river, the Tuttle River, North Tuttle River is there, and there's just evidence in every direction of all the incredible what's left of the incredible mud flow or avalanche that came through here. He just pointed out that all of these rocks here are angular. They're not rounded because they haven't been rounded off going down the valley in a huge mudslide like they are rounded at the early part of the tour when we were, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 miles down the river. Okay, so this is the whole mud flow valley. The mud cut through all of that, left a sediment base of about 150 to 200 feet. On the sides it created dams for the cold water lake, and then on the other side it created a dam for the Castle Rock Lake. And so that is the North Tuttle River down there, and you can see. How far are we from the mountain now, more or less?
We are probably, maybe 8 miles away.
Okay. This is explaining how the mounds appear or form in the debris flow. And you can see them all over. There was one over here that was really neatly defined, but I can't see it anymore. It looked like a perfect cone out in the middle of nowhere.
Feet up in the air, because all this debris, logs, boulders, debris, all this stuff came slamming in here fast. Yeah.
Tree is upside down. One of the millions I got knocked over.
Looks like a big ice cube. What's that?
Okay, Bill is saying that it's very possible that this round hole exiting there could have been a huge chunk of ice that came from the 18th explosion. Because first there was the landslide, the mountains debris, and then there was the mudslide after. The mudslide was, I don't remember how long after, but this well could have been a monstrous piece of the glacier that later melted itself down and joined the mudslide, perhaps, but as it melted, then it left this cavity.
That it formed inside the crater in less than 2 years. You had very significant sized glaciers that formed in there in the shade. Doesn't take long ages to form glaciers, does it? 2 years. You had substantial glaciers forming in there. And when things heated up in 1982, the magma started working its way up again. It melted those glaciers, and that's how you got the mud flow. You melt that ice, it mixes with the ash. It came right dripping through here as a mud flow, and it downcut these canyons in one day. And so it looks like a miniature Grand Canyon. Today they call it the Little Grand Canyon of the Toutle River. That's what it's called. It's a 1/40th scale model of Grand Canyon, and it's really fun to think about. Somebody asked and there's glaciers forming there today inside the crater as well. In fact, glaciers have become quite significant in there, in part because there's shadows in there, and it doesn't get as much sunlight in there inside the enclosed crater. And so there was a glacier that formed around the back side of the dome. You can see the dome in the center there. And it worked its way around and on both sides, and now the two have joined in the front, and there's actually ice at the front of it. Now the ice is covered with dust and rock debris that covers it up. So it's like most glaciers, it's got a coating of rock or ice or rock or powder on top of it, so it's dark colored. It doesn't look like white ice, in other words. But you got substantial ice up there right now. Yeah, I went up there in 1985, something like that, and we were able to get into the restricted zone with Steve Austin. And we got in there. I drove my pickup truck right across the plain out there. There was no problem then, you know.
How high did you go up?
We went we didn't go all the way up to up that tongue. You can see the kind of tongue of material that goes up. We didn't go all the way to the top of that tongue, but we made about I don't know, about halfway up that tongue kind of thing, just to look around, and we had to turn around and come out again. But so that tongue of material was pyroclastic flows. And we haven't talked much about the pyroclastic flows, but it's what formed that 25-foot thick layer of, remember that neatly layered deposit, 25-foot thick. And that's preserved in the walls of these canyons down here, right, in these little canyons. And most of the pyroclastic flows did not extend out more than a mile or 2 miles, something like that. Now the blast cloud was, you call it a dilute pyroclastic flow, where it was rock and gas and debris that knocked down that forest. It actually had mass behind it, and it's what knocked down the forest in 6 minutes, right? So, and then what else can we say here? Everybody get to see Spirit Lake from here?
Yeah.
Can you see Spirit Lake?
A little bit back there.
There's a little corner of it out there to the left. And what else can we see here? 87 is okay. Okay. That's what, 800 feet, or 870 feet maybe? Yeah, could be. So this is where David Johnson was, I guess, a couple hundred meters this way on the ridge when he made his famous radio call, Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it. And what happened at that point? He was probably, well, he was at this point over here somewhere, and he felt the 5.1 earthquake. No question about it. He felt that, and he saw the landslide, and it was going northward. He's over here in this distance, and the landslide within minutes, it caromed around this wall over here. A lot of it spilled into Spirit Lake. A lot of it went directly over the ridge over there in particular, and right around here was probably caromed. It was beginning to make its turn to go down the valley, and it overtopped this position here. And probably some of the rock went literally airborne over the top of this ridge here. They never found his remains. They found pieces of his camper. That's as much as they ever found. So Johnson Ridge is named after him. You don't want an observatory named after you, do you? Yeah. Anyway, okay, so we learned a lot of things today. We learned a lot about, wow, canyons can form rapidly. Layered rock can form rapidly. You don't need millions of years to do it. You got these trees that settled vertically in the bottom of Spirit Lake today. You drained the lake, it would look like an ancient forest. You got isotopes selected from inside the dome there that were dated to be upwards of 2.8 million years in age for rock where you know its true age is 7 years at the time when they sampled it, the date of crystallization of the rock. Something's wrong with these methods. Something's wrong with this belief that this Earth is billions of years in age. But this whole belief system that the Earth is long ages is based, it hangs on a very thin thread called radioisotope dating. You snip that thread and the whole thing falls to the ground. There's no other evidence that the Earth is billions of years old apart from that. And when it falls to the ground, the whole evolution paradigm falls with it because it depends on it. Darwin established it that way. It's been that way ever since. The age question and Darwinism have always been joined at the hip. Billions of years. They go together. Don't tell me you can separate them. You can't do it. And so Jesus, he said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." All right. I think we need to know the truth that the claims of billions of years and of evolution are not true, and that we have every reason to believe the Bible just as it's written.
Okay, here they're showing how the blast just tore the tree in two. There are thousands upon thousands of stumps like this, showing the power, the force of the explosion that came off the mountain on May 18th of 1980 at 8:32. The sign here says the north side of the mountain slid away, releasing a tremendous sidewise explosion. The searing blast plowed through the landslide, picking up large rocks and other landslide debris. Within 90 seconds, the debris-filled blast struck this forested hillside, pulverizing ancient trees. The nearly 500-mile-per-hour blast shattered and toppled trees, sweeping some into the valley in front of you. You can see they went like arrows with the blast, covering everything, even on that far mountain. And the blast ripped their bark and branches, carrying them miles away. The mangled stumps around you are all that remains of the 150-foot tall trees, testimony to the blast's incredible power. So that's where it is. That's the mountain. It's so hard to give an explanation of the size, or you know, there's nothing over there to show you how big it is. But from side to side, the crater is a mile wide, which means our town of Fegama would easily fit inside that crater. It would be, you know, have plenty of space left over. Spirit Lake was completely moved as this huge tower of smoke and ash and trees and rocks and mud came flying at this. Later on, these were created, these different canyons, all of them with a little river in them like that. And the river did not make that canyon. It was made on that day in a matter of seconds. And then that whole valley we've been driving up is over the hill here. This is the Johnston Observatory. The man was here watching it happen when it blew up. He managed to call on ham radio. Never found him. This ridge would have been hit by, you know, a 500-mile wall of rock for all practical purposes, and was completely shredded. And you can see, I mean, that ridge is miles away over there, and you can see it's littered with the stumps, with the trees that were blown over from here and went through the air like arrows all the way to, you know, the other surrounding mountains, really. Okay, I got interrupted there. That's a new dome that is forming and could erupt